they're a bunch of fucking pecho frios. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast of and for the people, the greatest football podcast on earth, Francamente. My name is Franca. I'm your host, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Are you ready to buy us your football content? Let's go. Hello, hello, hello. You might notice that I am not holding the mic. If you're watching on YouTube, I can now speak with both hands. It's been a transition from beautiful set to transition set to no set to some set to we're still in progress here, but we're moving towards freedom of hands. So the desk is set up. The device we're using is now my trusted iMac, which was packed up. It wasn't set up. I was using my laptop, which I also loved. I mean, image-wise, it was all good. But now it's like a more stationary, like more profesh setup. So if you're watching on YouTube, you might be able to tell that I'll talk with both hands a bunch. Welcome. Thank you for joining. This is going to be chaos episode. Stuff is insane. I've got zero plan for this episode as it stands right now. So we'll see what comes out. Thank you for being my loyal followers and listeners. What am I wearing? Okay, so today's kit is super special. Head over to YouTube or to the selfies to check it out. Okay, it is a game worn Huracán Buceo kit. Huracán Buceo is a cult classic team from Uruguay. Cult classic. My dad, it's from the neighborhood that my dad grew up in, and my dad has been a fan his whole life. It's a small club in terms of like in terms of systemically, right? It's a small club historically. I think they've played in the Segunda División more often than in the Primera División, but it's one of those clubs that has a huge following. They had financial disaster, which they've bounced back from, and they were able to come back and play. And it's just one of those like cult classic teams. And because there's two big teams in Uruguay, obviously, a lot of people will say like, oh, if you're a fan of like a small team, you're a fan of a small team, and which big team? And small team fans will tell you like, no, that's my team, right? And so it's a whole thing, the history of like small clubs, big clubs, the relationship between the two. It's really, really interesting. So I love this kit because it's like so sentimental. I never actually wear it in real life, like it's not even mine, but it kind of is a relic, so it just kind of like hangs out. Like I get to wear it for recording because it's a couple, whatever, however long it is, and then it goes right back. I don't wear it out. I don't eat in it. Like there's no chance of spilling anything in it. It's game worn, which is a pretty big deal, right? A pretty big deal. Oh, Círculo Católico, interesting sponsor choice, because there's been some happenings in Uruguay around these medical entities. So interesting stuff. So real cool kit today. And historic. And so let's start out by talking a little bit about small club culture, right? So like it's interesting because in the rest of the world, and I'm going to speak about obviously Uruguay, Argentina, Europe, Western Europe, right? There people who are fans of small clubs are fans, like they're real hardcore fans. They make it almost their whole identity, but it's like in a cute way. They follow their club, they support their club, not only whenever possible, like monetarily, because a lot of these clubs go bankrupt because capitalism has ruined football, and so a lot of times fans have to step in. We've seen this happen in England, we've seen this happen in so many places, right? But that fandom never dies. In fact, it's almost like fandom when a team goes under or when something happens, when there's financial crisis or any sort of crisis, fandom increases, right? Instead of decreases. And people are like hardcore fans. Like there's a whole thing about fandom, passion in the Southern Cone. And like this also pertains to Europe, obviously. Like you're a fan for life, right? There's many things you can change. Guillermo Francella's character said this in El Secreto de sus Ojos, in 2009, I believe that movie came out. One of the best movies of all, like ever, literally of all time. And he said, you can change anything. You can change wife, job, house. You can change career. You can change your religion. But there's one thing you can't change, and that's your passion. And he was talking about actually, so it's a whole thing. Anyway, the point is that in that movie, the passion he was referring to was football passion, because there's a criminal that they're trying to catch, and I won't spoil it because I want you to see it, okay? But that quote pertains to football club, like fandom, right? So generally, because of capitalism, because even in the most colonizing countries like England, there's still like among the people, there's still a heavy sentiment of like anti-capitalism, like anti like modern football, like this like return to the times where like football was simple. There was not all this like worry about kits and second kits and whatever. It was a different time, right? There's like a nostalgia piece. So with that comes this like hardcore fandom for your club. And if your club is a small club that has had struggles, that, I mean, we've seen it with Sunderland Till I Die. That documentary blew up. Like we've seen this kind of culture in the mainstream, right? Like a lot recently. Like in the last like probably 10 years. And it's really interesting what happens in countries where football history is long and arduous and as old as countries are in some cases. And it's also interesting the way there's like gatekeeping, right? Kind of stuff of like, oh, you're not a real fan because your team has a stadium. Imagine like, it's like back in my day, like we had to walk uphill both ways in the rain and snow and whatever, right? Like that kind of like sentiment of like, oh, like, yeah, like our field is, whatever. We don't even have a stadium. And like you, Peñarol and Nacional fans and Barcelona fans, you don't know what it's like to suffer. And I actually kind of love that narrative because it is in a way kind of like it's anti-establishment, right? And like as a fan of big teams, I fully love it. Like I get it. I understand it. And it's also interesting the dynamic between like global South big teams clubs and like European big clubs. So it's still not the same thing. There's still all sorts of jokes in the global South and in the Southern Cone. In Uruguay specifically, because Argentina's league is obviously like very much more well known than the Uruguay league among lay people, about like, oh, it's not the same thing to play in Montevideo as it is to play in Manchester, right? Like there's all sorts of like jokes and stuff like that are mainstream in Uruguay. So all of this to say that culture around small clubs is so beautiful everywhere in the world, except, you guessed it, in the hub of the empire, the United States, right? Like with so much else, the United States cannot literally function without ruining everything for everyone. And so in the United States, it's almost like that small club culture thing of like, oh, we, like, oh, MLS sucks, but like follow this like USL team or whatever. Like it's so convoluted. Like the reasons why people follow those USL teams and like lower division teams are like so convoluted and so fucked that like it almost is a turnoff, right? It's almost like the anti-establishment position, ironically, is to be an MLS fan over like a USL team, because those types of narratives in the United States around small clubs are rooted in like there's so much misogyny, there's so much like US centrism, imperialism. Like these aren't like innocent, like, oh, my poor club people, right? Like And I think for starters, one of the biggest issues is that this country doesn't have football history really like the rest of the world does. And like haters will say, yeah, they, it is a thing, whatever. Like it has history, but it's not like, it's not even one of the top four sports in the country, right? Like, and we've talked plenty on this podcast about the reasons why. So it not being a massively popular sport leads to this like inferiority complex that United Stations have. Interestingly, United Station football fans have at the same time an inferiority complex and a superiority complex, right? They're hella imperialist, but they also are always trying to like prove something to somebody, right? Because their team is shit, and they don't know anything, and they're like all like, "Whoa, like America," like it's like the perfect storm to create like the worst possible environment in the United States, like for United Station football fans, right? And so you see like some of the most horrendous, like heinous stuff, blended in with imperialism, which includes misogyny, racism, and all of those things, but it's not limited just to that, right? Like the U.S. centrism piece is always there. And so these people that are on top of being United Station football stands have this like morality superiority complex of like, oh, I'm this pure football fan because I'm a fan of the Louisiana Pickles, or I don't know, whatever like they're called, right? I actually think there is really a team called the Pickles, but I don't know where they're from, but I think it's like baseball or something. Anyway, so they're like, so like they make that their whole identity, like, oh, I'm so pure, like you don't know anything, like I know what it really is like to suffer. You can't take on that narrative when there's clubs that are hundreds of years old, that when they folded, their team that was bought by fans, brought back to life, climbed the ladder, blah, 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 et cetera, and then beat the team that was then bought out. Like there's all sorts of glory to a lot of these small clubs. And again, we're talking small, not in the sense of size of fandom or anything like that, even though obviously they don't tend to have the same amount of fandom as like the big teams, but like not one of the top, definitely, I mean, obviously like many countries, it's top two. Some countries, are lucky to have like a top four, top five, top six, rarely anymore. But outside of that, small clubs in that way. The difference is, and the reason why people in the United States need to check themselves yet again, as they do so often, is that you don't have football history, and you also don't have something very crucial that's also missing, which is promotion and relegation. And this is something I never like tweet about or talk about on socials, because it's some of the most toxic people are part of the pro-rel movement, like misogynist assholes, again, US centrist, like racist, like are part of that movement. So I don't get involved. But the reason why it's exciting to be a small club fan in the rest of the world, and not really in the United States, is because you have a chance as a small club. There's always that hope that you'll get promoted if you're in the second division and third division, et cetera. And we've seen Cinderella stories. Look, I've been talking this whole year about my boyhood club, Luton Town, okay, getting promoted. And I think they had something ridiculous, like within like 14 years, they went from like Sunday division to Premier League, right? It's like a Cinderella story. It's beautiful. Realistically, there's a part of us, and we know that when they get to Premier League, they're not going to thrive. But like getting there is already such a feat that for small club fans, like that's a huge thing to be like a point of pride. Like, look, we can be like Luton Town. There was another team a couple years ago that had like the chance to go up to like, to League One, and it was like a whole thing. Everyone like got behind them. Like same thing with the Bees. Oh my gosh, that was also my boyhood club for that year when they got promoted. So like there's like a Cinderella story aspect, like historically, teams that have had glory historically that now don't. Okay, the Sheffields come to mind, that type of team. And then there's always that chance that you'll get back up there. That does not exist in the United States because there's no promotion and relegation. And so these people have like these inferiority complexes and also have like nothing to hope for. Like they don't know the glory of having been in what would be top flight in the US, right? MLS. Or in some and like the rare instances where you see good people with small club lore or historic club lore, we should call it, because it wasn't a small club, is like people who were Cosmos fans, like that type of fan that knows the glory of having had Pele on their team. Okay. And then obviously like the way that the Cosmos then, you know, floundered and whatever, but Cosmos lore is still very much alive and well, right? So there's just so much to criticize about United Stations stands in every way, and they just never get it right. They just never get it right. There's no like they just don't get it right. So we love to dunk on United Station fans, but there is definitely a philosophy here beneath all of this talk about like small club fandom and like being like, you know, this holier than thou, whatever. So I am an interesting case in that I am a big team person in every country I'm from or represent or just watch. But that is almost like by happenstance. And in the cases of the teams, like by happenstance, meaning like I was born into these teams, right? The cases of the teams from my child, like from birth, okay, Peñarol, Boca, and Barcelona, they're all the club of the people. They just had this graphic go around that was like massive. I'm gonna pull it up. Maybe we can have it somehow posted or whatever. But it's amazing, and it's also super flawed in many ways, but in the important ways it's perfect. It's so I don't know if you've seen it. It's like the timeline, it's like the political divide line of clubs all over the world. And so they've got let me pull it up. Did the system remove the post? No, I found it. It's in Spanish, or at least the version I have. The socio-political spectrum, el espectro sociopolítico del fútbol. It looks like this. Okay. Maybe we can have it somehow like pop up so y'all can see it, or you can find it, or like whatever. Okay. And the reason I thought of this is because in every case, oh, this is a different one than the one I initially saw. People must have been messing with it. That's really interesting. In every case, Peñarol, Boca, and Barcelona are historically teams of the people, for the people, somehow related to like anti-fascism. Okay, all three of those teams have philosophies. That's not an accident for why those are the teams I was born into. Okay, so even within big club fandom, okay, we've got teams that are, you know, committed to social justice in some way. And of course, capitalism ruins everything. So like, we're not Delulu. Okay. We're not Delulu. And like, I know that realistically saying today that Barcelona is a club that's, you know, in any way committed to social justice is kind of ridiculous. Although that history is important, right? In terms of like having been historically the anti-fascist team and all that stuff. So on this spectrum, in this version, and I say it's different because I thought I'm seeing in this one, Nacional, Uruguay Nacional is like very much in the middle, like almost like at the middle. But in another one I saw him like fully to the right. And also River Plate needs to be on the right for sure, because they're Los Millonarios disgusting. And then you've got the proletariat. So you've got the left and the right, and then you've got the elitism and proletariatism, like the proletariat at the bottom. So ideally, all the clubs would be in that bottom left quadrant that we were fans of, right? Now, some are flawed. So Boca Juniors is very blatantly there. They put Peñarol more towards the elitism side, which is ridiculous. They put Barcelona all the way at the top of elitism. Interesting. I think any big club in Europe definitely should be on the elitist side at this point. They put St. Pauli towards the left and proletariat, which we haven't talked about St. Pauli at all. We haven't talked about St. Paul. Actually, this actually kind of looks like the St. Pauli kit I have too. St. Pauli has fucked up. St. Pauli's losing fans. Official fan groups are dropping like flies because St. Pauli is siding with genocide and Zionism. In the most ironic twist of fate, the craziest shit, right? That like it's like St. Pauli's like the club in the world that people look to for like social justice guidance, and like they fucked up and they're losing fans left and right. But this, I guess historically this graph put them there. But all of my clubs, regardless, right, that I was born into, are on the left side. And then their opponents are on the right side. So I just think it's hilarious. Obviously, there's so much to unpack here about like certain clubs, like being, and so they put like Paris fully in the fascist side, PSG. River belongs there. I can't see, and they put Nacional like a little towards the left, too much for me. Where they put United is odd, but I think they had also put Liverpool in a place where like Liverpool fans are all up in arms about. I just think it's hilarious that this exists, and I love that it's like creating debate, and that we can like kind of know, like, this is the perfect tool for those folks that are like, get the politics out of my sport or whatever. It's like politics and sports have always been super related. We don't have to. We've said that to death, right? But I think it's hilarious that this exists, and that, we can use it as a tool, like to be like, see, we're not just like these crazy people that correlate football with politics. So I think it's beautiful. So yeah, if you're a fan of a small club, like stop being so arrogant about it. That's like in the United States, that's like that's the takeaway here for the first half of the show. Like, stop being so arrogant. You've got no history. There's nothing morally better about you than anyone being a fan of MLS, because literally you're in the most capitalist like center of hub of imperialism in the world. So like regardless, you're still complicit in that. Your teams probably still have money. So there's like a whole thing that we could analyze and discuss about small club fandom. Like with everything else the US stands do, it's wrong. So like just unpack that, just like analyze that within yourself. And there are some small club fans in the US that like are about it and they get it, like anti-MLS people for the right reasons. Like that's my people, But unfortunately, the fascists are loud. They're not more than us, but they are louder. So abolish fascism. On that note, let's go to a little break. We'll be right back.
Hey, make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And help us out by leaving a rating and review, and remember to share it with a friend. Don't forget to follow Franca on Twitter and Instagram at Francamente for the latest news. And lastly, please visit realfrancamente.com for bonus content, including articles, photos, and for more information about the podcast.
And we're back. I think for the second half of this, we're going to talk about heartbreak, because football has been, in the Discord the other day, join the Discord, by the way. We had a brilliant discussion about football heartbreak. Okay. Everyone knows I'm a United fan, but that I'm Arsenal adjacent. And I am more honestly rooting for Arsenal this season than anything else. I really want Arsenal to win the league. I really want Arsenal to win the league. It's about time. And Arsenal has broken my heart twice recently. So last week they had a chance to literally go get like first, be in first place. Liverpool lost. Manchester City won. But and all they had to do was beat West Ham, right? Wait, was it West Ham or Aston Villa? Now I get confused with those colors. No, it's West Ham. That's all they had to do. And they didn't do it. And it really pisses me off when teams have it it's their own destiny. It's not one of these things where I have to do math to be like, if so-and-so wins and so-and-so loses and whatever. It is in your hands and you fumble it. Now, that day was heartbreaking for other reasons. I think I don't remember if United won that weekend. Some other like heartbreaking stuff happened in football. I don't remember. And then we had Champions League week. ¿Para qué? ¿Para qué te traje? ¿Para qué te traje? Okay, like Barcelona, baby. And maybe those of us that got our hopes up were asking for too much. Maybe we were too delulu because Barcelona's been in shambles now for years. And so the fact that we really thought that they were going to pull through this, it's on us, quite frankly. I'm going to take full accountability, responsibility there, but I have no words. I have no words. PSG, what a fucking scam of a club. PSG is like the epitome of everything that's wrong with modern football, with imperialism, okay? And like, they're a bunch of fucking pecho frios. Like, there's no, like, I can't stand turtle ass face fucking Mbappe. I can't stand him. On top of that, Arsenal lost too. And obviously like and Atletico lost too, and I would have loved if it couldn't be Barcelona for it to be Atletico, and fucking Real Madrid won. Like the last couple of game dates for me, the last week like 2 weeks or so, Peñarol had a good game and then a bad game. Boca has had some good games. Cavani has been scoring, but I am just suffering. Like football is suffering, to the point where I asked the Discord at one point, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we do this to ourselves? I in looking for other hobbies, I asked if anybody liked curling. My dad loves curling, related to Canada, like trips, and curling's nice. I asked, what's your favorite olive? Mine's definitely Castle Voltrano. Like I love those olives so much. So like in trying to like change the subject in the Discord from football, anything to not talk about the heartbreak that has been being caused to us by this game that we just continue to put ourselves, through this for what? All we know is suffering. We give our loyalty to these clubs. We buy jerseys. How do they repay us? By losing. Now, I will say it's once you get out of that like rage, you go through all of the stages of grief, right? You get out of the rage, you start to move, you have sadness, you start to move towards understanding and accepting, right? And then there's the rationalizing. And then when you get to like back to yourself and like your analytical self, it's like it is inhumane, especially in Premier League. It is inhumane the amount of games these humans are subjected to and expected to just like perform like robots, right? I've said this before, but it's an unpopular opinion because people love to come for coaches, they love to come for players, right? And we should in many, many cases, but we've gotten to such an extent where like these schedules are so packed that it only makes sense that this is, like what can we do? how can we expect these humans to behave like robots, right? I'm thinking about this a lot too as it pertains to the NBA. By the way, one joy that I'm having recently, I'm allowed can I have one joy as a treat? It's the Knicks. The Knicks clinched second in the East and or in their in the East. And they have not had this successful of a season in many, many, many years. And all of us had lost all hope when all the injuries happened, and we still like pulled it off. So like, I don't, regardless of what happens here on out, I'm so proud. I'm always proud to be a Knicks fan, even more so when they do bad. Cause it's like one of those things where it's like, you really know you're a hardcore Knicks fan because they're not good. Well, now they're good. And so like, that's bringing me joy, but I'm thinking a lot about that schedule too. Of course there's injuries. Of course, like people get tired, exhausted. It's like an existential exhaustion, right? Because these schedules are insane. Like Premier League schedules are starting to be up there with the ridiculousness of NBA schedules, 100 games in a season. Are you fucking kidding me? And so like, and now they play for this and that cup and whatever. Of course they're going to fizzle out right around this time where it's like more important to not fizzle out. And on top of that, you've got the inequality caused by capitalism, which is this is where modern football is ruining everything, right? And capitalism, imperialism is ruining everything, because on top of everything else, you've got the fact that the teams that have all that big dirty oil money, sports washing teams, have the money to have 2 and 3 healthy good squads. So a couple of injuries aren't going to hurt them at all. But even a regular big team like Arsenal doesn't have that luxury, right? And so what are we doing? How do we keep allowing this to go on? It's kind of insane. And there's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot to analyze with the way that we put on these players this like just unrealistic expectation to perform like robots. So even though football breaks my heart, and it does, and it does, I still have space to understand that something needs to change, that I will always come back to you, football. You are like my toxic first love. I just can't quit you. But the heartbreak definitely does suck, and it's frequent recently. So on that note, thank y'all so much for listening to another episode, and I will catch you on the next one. And that was another episode of Real Francamente. Thank you so much for listening. I am literally obsessed with y'all. Please share with your like-minded friends. Follow us on socials at Real Francamente. Leave likes, comments. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube. Leave comments and ratings and reviews there only if you love us. Check us out on Discord. Join the fun. Check out our website for more content, www.realfrancamente.com. We'll catch you on the next one. And as always, bias your football content.